my dad was a junk peddler. He used to go from town to town picking up gunny sacks, barrels, scrap, whatever he could make $1 on. And frankly, I got hooked on his business. I used to go out with him when I was 5 years old, be a sidekick in a truck and keep him company. And I learned to love, appreciate, and enjoy being with my father. And we became incredible friends, and he became an incredible teacher. Dad had a 5th grade education and spoke not fluently, but could speak 7 different languages. So when he would go to communities around, if he was in a German community or Lithuanian, he would be able to speak enough of the language to kind of be like one of them. And I used to be so fascinated by what he did with the limited background that he had, that he became my icon. He never really knew it, and nor did I say it to him. But he taught me so many early skills in life that it really brought me way ahead of my constituency, the people who I grew up with. I was much older than them and much more sophisticated in the real world out there, I believe, than what most people were at the age that I was at. Like I said, I started with Dad when I was 5, and when I was 12 years old, I was a full-fledged peddler. He gave me a checkbook, and I had a driver who used to go out with me on Fridays after school, or during the summertime. I'd go peddling, and I'd go to the same places that Dad went to because they remember me since I was 5, and they treated me with respect. And as an adult, the fact I had Dad's checkbook and I would sign his name to the checks, and back in those days people didn't look closely, they took the check and that was it. And as I experienced all this real life at a very early age of business, and it truly was business, I made very good money. At 12 years old, there was days I'd go out and make $200-300 peddling, which was outrageous in those days, because I mean it wasn't like we were wealthy by a long shot. But I learned to enjoy it so much that I couldn't wait to get out of school. My ambition was to leave school as quickly as possible. And when I was coming around to those days of high school graduation, I was a graduate at 17 years old, they kept nudging me and driving me crazy and said, "We want you to go to college." And I said, "I'm not going, so forget about it." One day they had this great plan and sat down at the dinner table and they said, "Look, we're fine if that's what you decide to do, but we want to make you a deal. You go to school, you try it, you may like it, and it may change your whole perspective as far as education is concerned. If it doesn't work out, you tried." And I said, "That's a fair deal." And I went and bought my books, got into school, got a few classes. On the 3rd day, I was back at the office, and my dad said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Look, I kept my part of the bargain, now you keep yours." And I said, "Dad, we should go in the book business." I spent $40 for the books, they gave me $15 back, I haven't opened the first book yet. So I learned very quickly there's a need for certain things, and there's a lesser need for certain things a day later. And that single experience of going right into work is what really gave me, I would say, not just the desire, but the ambition to make something in my life. My father will never know this to the degree that I tell you here today. He's passed away since 20 years ago. But I used to watch him work. And I think, we have these deep-seated things sometimes inside of us that we don't really know where they come from till some later time in life. Where do we get the strength, or where do we get the desire, or where do we get the ambition? And we really don't know. But someday we do find out. And as life turned and I became more successful in life and had an opportunity to experience lots of things, and Dad was around to see much of my success, he didn't realize what part he played in my life to give me this sense. I felt I owed him so much for what he gave me that I wanted to return to him something in return, which was to give him a better life, him and my mother. And I had this incredible desire to do well or make money in life so I could take care of them. Excuse me, I'm going to take my coat off here if you hold on here. So as when Dad passed away, we think about a lot of things. It's not like a martyr's thought, but it's a true thought that, we get older, we get a little more melancholy, a little more sensitive to things, and better understand some of the things in our life maybe later than happened earlier in our life. And the two things in my life that probably had more of an impact on me becoming successful than anything else, one was my father, and one was my oldest daughter, Sheila. I have 5 children. I have a son and 4 daughters. My oldest daughter, Sheila, had a stroke when she was 3 months old, and she has become handicapped with cerebral palsy. She's 41 years old today, and when we had Sheila and this so-called terrible thing happened to us, I never had anything like this in my life to deal with. So I figured you go to a doctor and you get these kind of things fixed. And my wife and I was 21 years old, got married, my wife was 20. And it was a phenomenon that was a wake-up of something I don't believe a lot of people experience, but surely I did. And it was, what am I going to do with my life for the sake of everybody else? I now have got my folks I feel I have to take care of. Not because they needed me, but I felt I owed it to them. I have this daughter that's handicapped. I have a wonderful son, wonderful wife, and we had 3 other daughters after that, all healthy. And here I am one day with 5 children and a wife. I'm 28 years old, and I have an incredible amount of responsibility, but I have something in me of a burning desire to be successful that even when people would ask me back then, what makes you tick? I couldn't answer it to them. I just said, look, I love what I do and I do it. But as life we look back on, there was no question that giving Sheila everything I possibly could and my family, and taking care of my father and mother in a way that I felt I owed it to them, gave me that, I would say, undercurrent and that drive never to give up, because I couldn't afford to give up, and I wouldn't give up. I hear the word entrepreneur. I've heard it for many, many years, and there's something magical about it to a lot of people. The first time I heard it, I didn't even know what it meant. And I remember one time I was called an entrepreneur when I was in my late 20s. Someone said, well, you're an entrepreneur. Oh, I said, thank you. I thought it was a good word. And I went and I looked, and sure enough, the meaning of it, what you'll all hear about today, is an unusual individual that really wants to make life successful and exciting and be formidable in the world that we live in today. As you heard Jeff talk about the brewery when I was in my early 30s, it was a breakthrough in my life. I was in the family business, and I was successful relative to what our business had been all the years. By the way, one thing I want to share with you, no matter what I did in my life, from the time I was 5 years old up to helping Dad or driving a truck, I always was, and I still am, and always will be proud of what I did. There was never a time I was embarrassed. I used to get dirty, and the dirtier I got meant the more successful I was when I was a peddler, which meant I was handling a lot of junk. Whatever I had to do, I felt proud in doing that. To the point where I remember driving the truck. When I was 15 years old, I had a full-fledged driver's license, and I was driving a truck. It was a beautiful fall day, and I was a smoker back then. I quit smoking 30-some years ago. But Mr. Cool as I was smoking my Marlboro, driving this truck in with a big load of gunny sacks on it. I remember I had my shirt rolled up, smoking a cigarette, driving down the highway coming to Minneapolis, and almost felt like there should have been a band there waiting for me, because I was so proud of what I did that week. It was such a perfect day, and I probably made $300-400. And I said, God, I'm the happiest person in the whole world. I was like 15 years old. It was moments like that and times like that that gave me, I would say, this extra bit of excitement and sensation is that I've always appreciated my life and what was ahead of me. I always look forward to it. Now, I will say to you that anybody in life that has become truly successful, and I'm talking now not in their private life, that's a whole different world, I'm talking about in their business. Anybody that has become truly successful has experienced problems with great severity to it and disappointment. But the difference between people who become those successful people and the people who really do make it in life, take those times as opportunities. I've always said adversity is opportunity. And that's an attitude thing. That is not a factual thing. That's something that's within your mind, something that you yourself can only bring to yourself, is this sense of, you know, this didn't work out, but I'm going to learn by this. I'm going to take advantage of it in the next thing that I do to make sure I don't make the same mistake again. But I always felt there was nothing that would keep me down. And when I was 33, 34 years old, I used to go to this little restaurant, 3rd Avenue North over here, by a little bag factory, a junk place where you used to haul our junk to it. And there was a gentleman there who used to be in the furniture business. And I used to see him there for 2-3 days a week at breakfast early. He was an elder man, but very friendly to our family and me. And he said, "Irwin, you ever followed Rainbow Brewery?" I said, "Hi, not really. I don't drink. I never drank beer." And he said, "You gotta look into it." I said, "Well, why?" He said, "I'm a board member." I knew he was. And he said, "We have more cash in the bank than what our stock trades for." I said, "That just doesn't make a lot of sense. How can people offer less money for the shares?" And he says, "Because we're a bunch of dead old people sitting there doing nothing, and they don't see any future in our business. And they're basically discounting us with no excitement." Well, I never had any real experience in that world, but I went and got all the public information on it, and I read every word of it. And it was so fascinating to me that somebody would allow a business stock to sell for less money than just the cash in the bank. And I'm going to shorten this story because there's much more to talk about, but I will tell you that through about 10, 11 months of almost nonstop thinking about it at night, I scraped together every nickel I could. And I bought $260,000 worth of their stock, which was just over 5% of the company. It had a market cap at that time of under $5 million. And it was just under 5. Anyways, I bought this stock and I had to file what's called a 13D, which is to tell the Securities Exchange, it tells the public what your intentions are. And I go and see a lawyer, and the lawyer said, "Well, what's your intentions?" I said, "Well, I'm not going to tell them." He says, "Oh, yes, you are." He says, "You go to jail if you don't tell the truth." I said, "What?" I said, "If I tell them, I got no chance." He said, "Well, that's the laws, and you better tell them what you plan on doing." I said, "Well, first of all, I don't have the money to buy it, but I'm going to try and get it." But he said, "We can't quite say it that way." And what we ended up saying was, we don't really know what we're going to do, but we may end up doing this, this, and this, which included everything from nothing to selling the stock to maybe buying the company. Now, the only thing I was short was about $4.5 million of money. And I didn't know a banker in the world that would make me a loan for $4.5 million, but I started banging on doors. And I got a call one day from my lawyer, and he said, "I got you an appointment with Carl Poland, 5 o'clock. I said, "Great. What do I?" He said, "Well, look, the guy doesn't like long stories. You got to give him short versions because you'll lose it very quickly." And my whole idea around Rainbow wasn't what I was going to make, but if it didn't work out, this is how I was going to get out of the investment and make money. So it was my downside is what I was going to express to him. I took about 15 minutes to tell him, and he says, "You better stop." Kind of felt upset with me. He said, I said, you don't like this, Mr. Poland? He said, no, this deal you got. Go look for the next one, he says. I said, pardon me? He said, I'm going to give you the money. Make you a loan. I said, really? I mean, I was so taken back because I just never expected anybody to give it to me. So he says, okay, I'll see you later, Irwin. And I was out of there in 5 minutes. I walked out. I was with my lawyer. And I said, did it really happen? He says, yeah, it really happened. And lo and behold, Carl became my mentor. And in fact, in 15 minutes, that man made a decision to make me a loan of $4.5 million to his bank, which was his legal lending limit at the bank, in excess. He had to go get another bank to overline because his bank could only give $2 million. He had to find $2.5 million. And he got the $2.5 million from a bank that already turned me down. So here I was through him. He brought this together for me. It was, without a doubt, the most awakening experience of my life. When I went into this brewery, I became a public figure. This 33, 34-year-old punk, the junk man, who been junk all his life, all of a sudden became a public figure. And I'll share you a little quick side story. When I took the brewery over, used to have a big party out at the old Metropolitan, by the Mall of America, where the baseball stadium used to be out there. And Grainbelt used to have a party for our distributors every year. I was supposed to put the chef's hat on and cooking hamburgers and serving beer out there and everything. These guys could really drink, let me tell you. And we got into the ballpark after. I swear to God, I'd never drank a bottle of beer in my life, ever. Not because I was so anti-alcohol, I just didn't like beer. So we're sitting in the stadium, and everybody is saying, get Irwin a bottle of beer. Everybody is sending me a bottle of beer. Now, fortunately, in those days, when you sat down, they had the opening, so I used to put it down and kick it, and the beer would go down. Flood. No one would know. They thought I was drinking all this beer. I was kicking it down. At the other end, I must have gone through 20 glasses of beer. They said, this guy is sober. He must be something unusual about it. I thought he was an alcoholic. I finally told the story one day to the distributors in a meeting. I said, look, I can't do that again. So I told them what happened. I thought it was the funniest story they ever heard. But that was my experience in drinking beer. Putting that aside, I had more sleepless nights with that investment in that company than probably anything I've ever done in my life, including after that. And what was difficult, it was the first time I had a responsibility for about 400 people, including beside that, all the distributors and their employees. And Grainbelt used to be the brand. That was one of the top brands in this part of the market. The unfortunate thing was the big boys were coming into town, Budweiser and Miller, and they were starting to make inroads. We were the highest cost brewery in America per barrel. And our average age was 57 years old. The average employee was making $16 an hour in 1975. They had 30% in benefits, and they had 11 weeks of vacation, 13 sick days. And what they did, they also had their contract, they could drink all the beer they wanted, all day long. Swear to God, all day long on their breaks. Now, if you can imagine these people, I mean, they were true alcoholics. And the worst part was that this was a seasonal brewery. We used to have our business come in the summertime. They want to go fishing and have a good time, so we had to go hire college students. And college students came to work, and they could drink all day long. You can imagine what that was. One flew over the cuckoo's nest, I can tell you. The whole place was a joke. So I went to the union. We had 9 unions, electrical, we had keg, we had the bottling plant, truck drivers. And I asked them for a concession. I said, if you will give me 1 day a week in the off season, take that for your vacation. I'll pay you for it. But 4 days a week, so I don't have to keep you here when we have no business going on. And you won't be out any money, but you'll take some of your vacation there. They said, no, we're not doing that. I said, well, we're going to implement it. And I did. And I lost the arbitration. And I made the decision at that time that I did not want to be in business any longer. It was the biggest disappointment of my life that if people don't understand, I was losing money, $200,000 a month in operations. If people couldn't understand that I was losing, what would happen if I ever made any money in the business? I had no chance. So I concluded it was time to get out of the brewery business. That was 10 months after being there. And again, many sleepless nights. I went to see Mr. Polad, and I said to him, Carl, I told you that I would make the hard decision. I've made it. I'm going out of business. I have no cooperation. And it's time for me to liquidate this company. I ended up selling G. Holmes Breweries, Russ Cleary, since passed away, very successful brewer in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I sold him our brands and our kegs. And Russ paid me $5 million for the names. And I ended up with all the assets, all the real estate. And here I was, a year later, with $5 million in the bank, no debt, 20 acres downtown Minneapolis, all this real estate. And I'm saying to myself, that's it, I'm done. My dad said, are you coming back to work? You had enough of this now? I said, Dad, I'm coming back to work, to the family business. I figured that was my kick for life, and that was more money than I'd ever see. 33 years old, that kind of money in the bank, the income of the property. So I hired somebody to help me lease the property out. I started going back to the family business, and I used to trade off with my brother-in-law opening up our little business. And I used to always read the Wall Street Journal in the morning when I would get there early. So it was my turn. I got the Wall Street Journal. I'm sitting down there one day, and I take a look. The W.T. Grant had gone bankrupt, and the receivables are being sold. $324 million worth of receivables. And there was an individual by the name of Jerry Schottenstein family from Columbus, Ohio. You have to know that this guy was one of the greatest closeout artists in the entire world. I don't even want to know what he's buying. Just tell me what it is, and I'll write a check for 5% more. I'll just take it. I don't care what this guy does. That's how good he was at what he did. The headline of the article was, the Schottenstein Group pays $35 million for the W.T. Grant receivables. This was like, 6:30, 4:07 in the morning. I get on the phone, I call up this individual who was my lawyer and was just going to leave the law firm and join me to help my real estate. I said, Dan, I want you to get on the phone today, call the trustee in bankruptcy for W.T. Grant and tell him we want to buy the receivables. And he said, what are you talking about? So I explained to him. He says, Irwin, this is nonsense. It's $35 million. I said, I'll pay 10% more, 5% more, pay $36.5 million. $37 million. So he said, are you serious? I said, yeah, I'm serious. So he called the trustee. The trustee said, you're an idiot. He said, no, and we've been working on this for 2 years. You're going to come here today and you're going to tell us you're going to buy this and take this thing. I said, yeah. I said, I have a gentleman I represent. He said, well, he's an idiot too. He said, tell him I said so. And this was the Wild Gotchel firm in New York City, big law firm. I was so ticked off when he told me this. I said, give me the guy's number. So I called him up and I told him that everything I knew how to tell him professionally. In other words, there's nothing going to get done. We are going to go there. We're going to bid for this thing. Are you going to let me in or not? To make a long story short, we convinced them to let us come in and give us 2 weeks due diligence. Now, I don't have any working for me. And this is one of the biggest collection operations in the United States. I went to see Mr. Polad. I said, Carl, I got the greatest deal you've ever seen. I tell him about it. He said, well, what do you know about it? I said, listen to me. You have to trust me. This deal will be the greatest deal we've ever had. I gave him my thought process and why. So he assigned 2 of his people with me, and we went to New York. And to make a long story short, Carl and I became partners in that transaction. We bought the W.T. Grant receivables. We ended up paying $44 million for them at an auction sale in court. And we stalled the closing of that transaction for about 35, 36 days. And we collected $20 million in that period of time that was still coming in. So when we closed, we ended up paying like $23 million for these $300+ million. We collected all of our money in 75 days and proceeded to collect money for 10 years thereafter. It was the mother lode, absolutely the mother lode of my life, and it's what gave me the beginning. Grain Belt clearly was the thing, my first shot, and gave me a great send-off. But this was the one that set me up for Jacobs Industries, and I made a decision at that time that I was going to go out and build a business. All this ideas about my hating business, that was wrong. I was very successful financially. My family was doing well. I was giving my folks a good lifestyle. And I took care of everybody around me. And it was giving me a very big high. And I started thinking, maybe I'm pretty smart. Maybe I know more than I thought I did. Which becomes very dangerous, is when we start believing our own bullshit. And so I concluded there's probably a lot more I can do out there. And I proceeded to start buying either stock or companies. In 1977, I bought the bankrupt Larson Boat Company from the First National Bank of Chicago. They had a loan outstanding for $5.1 million. I bought their loan on a Sunday. We were going to shut it down on Monday. I paid them $675,000 for their loan, which gave me access to the company. Started building boats, put money in the business, and I proceeded the next 3 years to lose $5.5 million in the boat business. Not a good move. I bought Arctic Cat, Lowell Swenson, the founder's family. Bought 12% of his stock. In 2 years, they filed bankruptcy. Didn't put me out of business, and I still had some bucks in my pocket, but this became the acid test. What am I going to do with these problems? Am I a man enough to figure out how to deal with this? Or should I just hold up my tent and go back to the family business like I said I should have done in the first place? Well, frankly, I had so much guilt in me for the people who followed me, because Arctic Cat was a public company. The boat business was a disaster. There was a lot of people working there counting on me, and I had this guilt complex that I'm going to let a lot of people down. So I said, okay, I'm going to go after trying to fix this. I put them all together. It was an interesting phenomenon. Arctic Cat used to be a New York Stock Exchange company, and I was a director of it as their largest shareholder. Went to a board meeting one day. They had a bunch of names on the board, names that were well known in this community and nationally. And the president of the company started crying and said, we're bankrupt. And everybody said, well, that's it. It's over. Next thing I know, they're walking out of the room, and they said, have the lawyers handle it, file bankruptcy, and we're done. I turned to one of my people and said, what's going on here? He said, they're throwing in the towel. I said, no, we can't. And I was so mad that people were so irresponsible not even to look at this. And I went out and hired bankruptcy counsel and went to reorganize Arctic. And what we did was we sold off the assets. I made a deal with the banks at the time. I said, let us keep the boat companies, because we'd already merged Larson with Lund into Arctic Cat just before it went bankrupt. So we took these two little boat companies out of there, liquidated the assets, sold it back, and people started Arctic Cat over again. And we had a little company at that time which was called Minstar. And I named it Minstar because I called it our Minnesota Star, is where it came from. I wanted it to be the star of Minnesota. I had great ideas and great ambitions, where most people might have thought I was nuts, but I said, I'm going to build something out of this. Our stock was 50 cents a share, and stock was still, people had it, lots of people had it. And to make a long story short, by 1985, which was like 5 years later, 4 or 5 years later, we had already developed it into really a great little business. And we were on the public exchange. Our stock was up to like $15 from 50 cents at that time. And we made a bunch of acquisitions in that 5 years, little ones. But then I took on AMF. I wanted to buy Hatteras boats. We had many boat companies at that time, but Hatteras was a great name, and I wanted to own Hatteras. Management wouldn't talk to me. It was owned by AMF. So I went out and I bought 9.9% of the company without them knowing it, filed my papers, called up the president of the company. It was a summer day, called him at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And the telephone, this is in White Plains, New York, at the big, it says, our summer hours are Monday through Thursday X, and Friday we close at noon. This is a billion-dollar company that decides to close at noon on Friday. All their factories are working, but they close. If you have any message, you can leave a message. So I left a message, told them whom I was their largest shareholder, and I was interested in buying their company. I left it on the switchboard. I didn't get a call back, but I did file the papers and had them sent to them on that Monday morning. And the next thing I knew is that our law firm in New York, which was known at that time, was the firm that told us I was crazy. It was why Groucho became my law firm. It was the one in the first place that said we were nuts, and they became my lawyers, good friends. They had their lawyer, Marty Lipton, who created the poison pill, call our lawyer, Steve Jacobs, no relationship, and he said, you have this lunatic for a client who left this message. He says, I'm very familiar with it. He says, is he serious? He said, yes. He said, well, they're not interested. He said, well, don't worry about it. You'll see a tender offer tomorrow morning for your company. And I put out a $550 million tender offer for AMF in 1985. I had arranged the financing. At that point, I had all the credit roll I wanted. And it was a slam dunk. In 2 days, I had arranged the cash necessary. We ended up taking that company over. And it was my great pleasure to fire Tom York, who was the guy that I'm talking about. They had an office building in White Plains, New York, with about 250 people in it. And when we closed the deal, I fired 249. And one person I brought to Minneapolis, and we never missed a day without those other 249. It was obnoxious what these people did. I mean, I'm not exaggerating some of the things these people did. This Tom York sent the corporate jet to Texas to pick up chili for a Texas party at his house in New York. Dead serious. He would send his son to North Carolina State by the private jet, bring him home on weekends, send him back on weekends whenever he wanted. He abused it so badly it was unbelievable. So I got great pleasure out of firing him and sending him on his way. It turned out he became a professor at North Carolina State University. Thank God you're here, you're not there. And the experience I had there was quite remarkable. The businesses were so happy somebody had shut this place up. And we owned Head Tennis, Head Ski, Head Golf, Tyrolia, Ben Hogan Golf Club, Mara Scuba Diving. We owned AMF Bowling Alleys. Obviously, we had Hatteras. There's 23 companies. And over the next 18 months, year and a half, I sold 60% of the companies for $540 million, $10 million less than what I paid for the whole business. And I ended up with 40% of the businesses. And again, this gave us an opportunity. We made a bunch of money, paid our debt off, and had a bunch of residual value there. The reason I'm giving you the sequel for all of this is that in between all of this, there were many setbacks. So many I can't even begin to tell you. And when I tell you the good part of the stories, you know, when they sued me and took me to court, every single time I got sued. Every single time I had depositions. Every single time I paid the lawyers a fortune. It was interesting, on the Grainbelt deal, on the MF deal, I got sued by a class action lawyer that we were buying the company too cheap. Well, I didn't expect them to sue me because I was paying too much. So I'm sitting there saying to my lawyers, why are they suing me? Let them sue somebody else. The shareholders want to sell out. He said, we got to give them $300,000-400,000. It's lawyers, they'll go away. This is never. Not a quarter. I'd rather give it to you than give it to them. So I always defended and never yielded to the typical blackmail that these people attempt to create, which still goes on today, by the way. You know, every time you see these lawyers, these strike lawyers, they're suing the class action, the waste in our system is so phenomenally obnoxious. It turns my stomach when I think how little value is brought other than the lawyers having such a good time stealing from the shareholders of the companies that people put their money into in this country. But in 1989, I decided I had enough public ownership. And Genmar was public at that time. And I decided to take the company private. And for those people who had that stock at 50 cents, we paid them $64.50 in cash for every one of those shares, 129 times what that stock was in 1980-81. The importance to that is, believe me when I tell you, the deck was stacked against me. I had very little chance of succeeding, as people would tell me what was ahead of me and how difficult it was. But there was one thing that I could never understand. I just didn't know how to give up. And the respect that I got for not giving up is what Jeff was talking about, this fear factor. I had built a reputation that you can step on with cleats and you still can't put them down. And that's what I wanted. I didn't want the fear factor. I wanted the reality that I will be a formidable opponent to succeed in what I'm doing, regardless of what the obstacles are, regardless of what I'm doing. Now, not in the world of just stupidity. I'm not going to sit there and just be dumb and lose knowing I'm going to lose. And there's times when you do wave the white flag and say, I made a mistake, time to move on. And that's happened, but not in the public arena. The idea behind all this, as I said earlier, was what makes a person want to do these type of things? And at the time, we really don't know. But today, I can tell you with great confidence. You know, I'm a very blessed individual. I said I was 65 years old. I have 5 wonderful children, 7 grandchildren, fabulous wife, 44 years, been married to the same woman. And we have gone through this life together as a family. My children today are all, in some fashion, in my businesses. All in different businesses, and all very responsible. I've been blessed, or we have been blessed with fabulous kids. I have son-in-laws who are in their businesses. My daughters are in business. Even my daughter Sheila, who's handicapped, I built a center, and our family did in Buffalo, Minnesota, for the handicapped called the Jacob Center, where they work in an occupational workshop there, where she works every day too, and loves it. Comes home on the weekends. All of this has made my life very magical. And there's been some basic principles in my life, as I look back, that have both got me through the difficult times and has made my life uniquely wonderful. And when people come to me with ideas today and they say, Irwin, what makes you look at a deal and excite you? And what doesn't excite you about a deal? Now, I'm not doing deals today like I used to. We will buy businesses that fit our businesses today. We're not looking for new industries, basically. But I have 2 basic business principles that's kind of the answer of why I do it and why I don't do it. I tell our people, very simply, I don't want to create a need in life. I want to fulfill a need in business. Now think about that. If I asked you, what is the difference between creating a need or fulfilling a need? I'll give you some extremes. Creating a need is a hula hoop. Didn't need a hula hoop, but it went to the moon. But it came down faster than it went up. Working with something and becoming successful in it, such as some of the things that I've given you examples of, I believe we brought value to it, and I believe there was a need for our doing what we did. A perfect example of what I believe is where we've become very successful from a startup business is we started our fishing tournaments. How many are aware of our fishing tournaments? Anybody know about those? It's the most remarkable thing in my life, frankly. When I did this, I concluded one of the ways to separate us from our competitors in the boat business, 65% of our business was in the fishing business. And anglers love to compete. They love it. And we wanted to find out what made them tick. They love to compete, whether it's for money, whether it's for trophies, whether it's for prestige. But going out and catching the biggest and the most is exciting. I said, my God, they took golf and they made a television show on it. And I said to the board, this was very difficult times, early 90s. I said, I'm going to start a fishing tournament circuit. They just see me looking around. They said, what are you talking about? I said, I gave them my rationale. There was a need for this. He said, Irwin, the boat business stinks. We're fighting fronts on every end. Why do you want to do this? I said, because if it works in tough times, for sure it's going to work in good times. This is the time to do it. And I proceeded, and the board, I said, look, if the board doesn't want to do it myself, I'll put it in my own portfolio. And I did. It wasn't like a boat, I just put it in my own because I could tell they didn't want to do it. And that was the beginning of the FLW, which stood for Forrest L. Wood, who's the granddaddy of Ranger Boats, and created that company. And used his name and proceeded to start fishing tournaments. This is the epitome of a need versus creating a need. We have been so successful with this. It has taken off beyond our wildest dreams. Today we have 252 tournaments. We pay out $43 million in cash money. We have our own production for television, our own magazine, our own internet. We have 250 tournament directors. We have 60 of the top names in the world, from Walmart to General Motors, Procter & Gamble, their sponsors. It has turned into a phenomenon. We started with bass, now we're in walleye, and we're in kingfish, and we're in redfish, and we're now in striper bass. And we've made an industry out of this. And now people are saying, oh my God, what a great idea. It only was 12 years it's taken to do this. And Walmart stepped up, made the big difference. But it's the perfect example of a need versus creating one. And as I look back in my life, everything that we have done as a company, we need to bring value to whatever that is. Whatever you do in your life, think about what the effect it will have, your idea, your business, your desire, on the constituency that you're serving or the world that you're going to play in. And it is not an unnatural thing for everybody to want to become rich. That's a pretty natural thing in the world we live in. There's only one little motto, I tell you. Pigs get fed, hogs get slaughtered. Remember that. Because the world, everybody's kind of a pig. But when you become a hog, you truly do get slaughtered. And the example of that is, know when to push the needle, know when to turn it on, and know when to get into neutral a little bit. So many people are looking for the quick buck, the fast road. I used to speak in the 80s, and I was asked to speak at a lot of college circuits. And this is when everybody wanted to go to Wall Street and get $1 million a year when you got out of school. And there was a lot of them that did. And I remember I was at Dartmouth, and I was speaking to the graduating class, their MBA graduating class. And I was fascinated by the greed factor. I was just fascinated. It was an open dialogue, going back and forth. And I let them just kind of drown themselves in their thoughts so they could tell each other how awful their thoughts were. They were awful. Because what they said was, we're going to school. We want to go to Wall Street. We want to be like you. We want to make millions of dollars. I mean, you make millions in a day. I said, you ever think of losing millions in a day? Oh my God, but look you're here. You're telling us how to do this. I said, I haven't told you how to do it. I'm really listening more how you want to run your life. And there was a girl, I'll never forget it. She started out by saying, isn't it the most exciting thing in the world, your life? What you do and how you do it? Why wouldn't anybody want to do that? I said, well, what do you want to do? She says, I want to go right to Wall Street. And she says, I want to make millions of dollars as quickly as I can. And I said, well, what are you going to do with it? I can figure out a way to spend it. Don't you worry, she said. And she's assuring me that she has this all planned out. And I said, her name was Darlene. I said, Darlene, I guarantee your failure. You will not make it. This was at the MBA graduating class. She said, what did you? I said, I don't care if you get straight A's. You will fail in what you're out to do. You have the most imperfect view and thought of what it's going to take to make it in life. I said, you know, did you ever think maybe the time to go to Wall Street was when you understand what happens in business out there? And maybe you should go get a job somewhere to find out how screwed up business is so you could improve that job that you have to show people how much better you are. And maybe someday you get to Wall Street and say, I understand this. And all of a sudden I start getting some questions. Like, well, what kind of job should we go for? What would you suggest? You want to go flip McDonald's hamburgers? Find out what makes a successful restaurant. You want to go work in a factory? Find out what makes a successful factory. You want to go work in an office? You want to be a buyer? You want to be a marketing person? Find out what the needs and the opportunities are. And it was amazing. This girl came up to me after. She said, I graduated. And she said, my mind was pretty well made up. She says, you know, you turned me totally around in such a short period of time, and here I've built my whole life up to this. She said, I'm going to go out and get a job. She said, do you think I'm going to fail? And I said, Darlene, that's really up to you. I said, but if you have the right attitude, and you really do focus on what you do best out there, everybody doesn't do everything the best. But I said, learn by your mistakes and win by the things that work for you, and sort them out in a way that you can make your life bigger and better in the world of business. Well, I can't tell you who she is, but she's a very famous person to me. And the reason I can't is I promised I would never tell her name to anyone. But she has become a very successful business person. Has her own company. She's well known in the world that she's in. And I must tell you that she wrote me a letter. About, this is maybe 10 years ago, I'm trying to think. This is 2006, 19, the late 90s. She said the greatest impact anyone made in her life was the day that I convinced her not to go to Wall Street. And she said, you know, I have watched many of the people in that room make it and lose it. And you convinced me what to do. I never went to Wall Street, but I did make it in business. She's made many millions of dollars. She has a very good life. One of the things that I talked about in speaking at the university was how important family was. And the things that, it's the part that gives you the necessary lift when you don't have any. It's almost when you're empty and you're looking for something, and your family picks that piece up for you just by being there. Whether it's a mother, a father, a wife, a sister, a brother. In my case, it was my children and my wife, my father, my mother. And when I was speaking, I always said, look, if you put everything ahead of family, and you become financially the most successful person in the world, it'll be the emptiest feeling you've ever had. Not because I've been through it, but I guarantee it, because there's many people out there who it's happened to, whose lives have become totally empty. And it's almost the ultimate high, and you get there and you say to yourself, this isn't what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be something else. And you say, what is it? And it's the thing you forgot about. It's those things that are as important as money, which is those who are your support system. And I realize that every family, every person, whether it be in this room or any room, has some difficult family situations, and sometimes you feel like it isn't there. And you have to work as hard at that sometimes as you do at your business, if not harder, because you will need that. I guarantee you in life, you will need that support system someday. And it won't be just to write you a check or give you some money. You'll need it there in your heart and mind to get you through some difficult times. And she told me, Darlene told me, that it was that turned her, because she felt that I had made it. And that if a person made it and felt one of the most important things that helped him, meaning me, make it, was my family, then she felt it was a necessity of something that you needed to be successful. Now, everybody's different. I mean, there's some people maybe don't need what I need. And many of you in this room maybe don't feel you need that type of thing for a support system. But I promise you someday you will. Whether it's a husband, a wife, a child, a parent, somebody in your life, a dear friend. Don't think you can get through life all by yourself without this support system. Take life a little more serious. I don't mean where you forget about the fun and the times that you do to enjoy life together. But there's a mix to being successful in life. It's not just making money. Money gives you the tools, many a times. Believe me when I tell you, I don't want to have to try and do what I've done without money. It's been very difficult. So I'm not speaking to you like some martyr or smart aleck here that says I can do it without money. Money was very important for my daughter, for my parents, for my kids, great educations, everything. I needed to make money to do that. But I also got all my desire from that. That's where I got my strength from. And that's where I got this extra sense and feeling that gave me the opportunity to become maybe a little more successful than many other people have. And it's a good mix. I used to say to people, look, if there's a perfect life, I think I have it. That's an exaggeration. I think I would just tell myself that. And for some reason, I think I exaggerated to myself. But who knows what a perfect life is? I could think of some other things I'd like to see happen. I've made some huge mistakes, business-wise, but I have capitalized on those and said, God, give me the strength to get through it on to the next thing, and I'll overcome. And I've been able to do that. And to stand here at 65 years old and tell you that I feel strong and relatively young to what my parents were when they were in their 40s, and my dad lived to 79, my mother lived to 92. I feel very fortunate. As I look ahead in our world today and I see the problems out there, the complexities of what's ahead of us as a society, both for your generation and my kids and my grandkids, it worries me because all these things that are in school here being taught have nothing to do with what I'm talking about, which is how do we become a better world? And what does all entrepreneurialism mean? What does things mean if the world is as chaotic as it is today? It's a sombering feeling to think that tomorrow isn't going to be like it is today in the world of opportunity, the world of existence. I mean, we think how self-destructive. I don't know how many of you, I get up very early every day. And some stupid reason I turn on cable. I go into my den, I turn the damn TV on, and I start seeing what's going on. And we live in a global world, 24 hours a day, whether it's business, whether it's war. And it starts off, it's just all bad. I mean, X got killed. This is going on here. It's a sickening feeling. I go to work, and I see people every day, and life here continues. I feel almost hypocritical at times, having the benefits that I had, seeing the world the way it is. What else can I do to help in the world? And there's very little I can do. I mean, I can stand here and talk to you and maybe make a difference in somebody's life in some little way, but I think it's important that, the society that we live in today is a herd instinct. We don't have a balance. We go over here or we go over here. We're never in the middle of everything. What I mean by that is we look for a perfect world, whether it be politically, in the different places in the world that the hot spots are, in the Middle East or in Asia, even here in America. People are looking for self-satisfaction, self-interest, not society interest, self-interest. And you as individuals have both an opportunity and a responsibility that if you want to be this entrepreneurial perfect person in the world of being successful, you have to take on responsibility with that. And the responsibility that goes with that is being a person in society that takes responsibility for whatever you can take responsibility for, whether it's family, whether it's business, whether it's a job, whether you're working for somebody. Take responsibility as a person to be a better person, a giving person. I'll tell you a quick story about my dad. He used to drive me nuts, absolutely drive me crazy. Anybody that walked into our little business and wanted a donation, my dad wrote a check. And I'm telling you, these were times very, very difficult. And I remember one time we were overdrawn in the bank. If there was 22 business days in a month, we were probably overdrawn 15 days. Not millions or thousands of dollars, but it was all the money we had. And we made it good. The bank was very helpful, took care of my dad. And one day we're overdrawn, we're trying to figure out how we're going to cover our checks. This guy comes in, my dad writes him a check for $100. I was so mad. I went into him, I said, how can you do this? How can you do this? I said, we're overdrawn the bank, we can't pay our bills, and you're writing a check for $100 for a donation? The person left, closes the door, he said, son, let me tell you something. He said, in life, the true gift in life is not receiving, but giving. It's a gift to be able, to you or to me, to give somebody something. The person that gets it, the recipient, they're not the one that got the gift. I gave them the gift. It was me. The gift was to me. I said, what does that got to do with it? You want gifts? I said, I'll go buy gifts for you. What do you want? He says, no. Are you suffering? You have no food? He says, you're not clothed? You don't have a business? He said, we'll make it work. Don't worry about it. He says, we have a responsibility. Our responsibility is to be there for other people in need. It was kind of a wake-up call. Didn't quite ring my bell totally, but it was a wake-up call to me because I remembered all my life about what he says. The gift in life is giving, not receiving. And I don't know, maybe in our religion, my dad always had this sense that in the Jewish religion that you get back multiples of what you give. We used to learn in the synagogue we used to go to, they used to call it tzedakah, which was gift, giving people in need, giving them what they need. And my dad, for some reason, lived his life that way, that basically said, look, I'm going to help people in need. I can't give them a lot, but I give them what I can give them. It was an amazing thing, because as I stand here today, I kind of do what my dad, I mean, I don't sit there and overdraw the bank and write checks, I can assure you. You don't last very long in this day and age. Back then, the banks used to cover your checks. Today, they won't cover them, I can assure you. But it was interesting because those were the type of things that have stuck with me. The responsibility of being a person, a responsible person, teaching our children, being with our family, taking the qualities. It isn't just making money. I know there are days when we all go through. There isn't a person in this room, I will guarantee you, that hasn't had one or more heavy days that says, I don't know if I get through this. Whether it's a financial problem, a family problem, you can get through it. Trust me, you can get through it. But it's up here when you get through it, and it's right here. Do you have the heart and mind? Do you have the desire? Do you think that the books are going to teach you how to be successful without the desire and the heart and mind? Believe me when I tell you, it ain't going to happen. This is the technical part that you need. And it's important that you get this. I've been told that, listen, I wish I had the education that I've missed, but I wouldn't give up anything for what my past has been. And my real-time experience today has given me a real education with no ability to make some mistakes on the paper. You make live mistakes. At least here there's some simulation. You may get a grade, but you ain't going to fail in life. You may get an A, or you may get a D, or you may get an F. But you get another chance at it. You make a mistake in real life, you may not get another chance. I guess what I'm saying to you is that there's a major part ahead for you to be responsible. I mean, for you to be successful, to be responsible. I told Jeff that I'd like to open up to some questions just to see what's on your mind if this audience is up to asking some questions, but please feel free. I mean, I'll tell you anything, I'll try and answer anything your questions are. And feel relaxed about doing it. I'm not embarrassed about anything you may ask, unless you go totally out of line. And I'll tell you so. But I would love to hear what your questions are. Will tell me what's really on your mind to some degree. And I'm not trying to psychoanalyze anybody here. But there's a lot for everybody to learn about what other people think about it. Is there anybody has any questions at this point they would like to ask me? Yes.
It sounds like you're a true philanthropist. You've opened this center in Buffalo. I'm just wondering what other charities and other things that you work with.
Well, we do a lot of things. One of the great things our family did was in 1991, the Special Olympics came to Minnesota, the International Games. And our family underwrote the World Olympics that came here. We put up $8 million to bring in 6,000 athletes from 130 countries around the world. We had 37,000 volunteers. You'll all be too young to probably. Does anybody remember the Special Olympics in 1991? Probably. It was truly the highlight of our family's life. And one of the real highlights was we had 60,000 people in Metrodome when we opened, and all the athletes were around the world. It was the first time Cuba and Russia and China came to the United States, hadn't yet. And I came in with the Minnesota constituency with my daughter, and it was the most unbelievable thing. We had to walk around the whole field, the line of the field, and we came in last, because I was the chairman of it, and I said, Sheila, do you want to go in a wheelchair? And she started crying. No, I want to walk. It was the most unbelievable experience of my whole life, walking around these 65,000 people with her walking. It was quite remarkable. I got more out of that than I put in, trust me. Now, I wouldn't want to do that twice in my life. It took 4 years. I gave all my staff that wanted. We had people that actually left corporate to go work full time. We had an office of about 300 people, 37,000 volunteers. FBI, Secret Service that came from all countries of the world. We had 200 private aircraft bringing these kids in from all over. It was quite a sight to see. Beside that, we do a lot of things during the course of the year. They are not high profile. I will tell you that I'm not a believer in putting my name on a lot of things. And I'm not interested in having our name associated with giving. Since the gift was for me, it was my gift. I don't need the publicity that goes with it. You get it automatically with certain things that you do. We give to a lot of very unknown places where we say we really don't care if the publicity goes with it because we think for the right reasons. But we give a lot of money in the course of the year. Yes?
First of all, thank you for keeping head tennis for a while.
Keep what?
Head tennis.
I sold it.
I know, but you kept it for a while.
Yeah.
When it was real. And then second of all, I read about you having some involvement with Disney.
Yes.
Or trying to, or something. Could you elaborate on that? It's really
Sure.
interesting.
In 1984, I had a call from Saul Steinberg. You ever heard Saul Steinberg's name before? Saul Steinberg was famous for greenmailing and always would buy stock. It was a company called Reliance Insurance Company. It was his dad's business. He took it over. And Saul was an individual that wanted his name in the paper every day, and all he could think about doing was making money, and he didn't care how he did it. But he was smart. And I received a call. I was leaving for Greece on a trip, 1984. I received a call from Sal, and he said, Irwin, I'm putting together a cartel to buy Disney, to take over Disney. He said, I will pay you 2% for any cash commitment you give me. I need to put together, I think it was $3 billion or something to put together to do this. And he says, I'm going to pay 2% for the commitment. I said, Sal, if I do this, are you going to go out and sell the stock back to them that you bought? He says, no, I'm going for this. I'm not going to give this one up. I'm going for Disney. I said, all right, I'll call you back. And I brought our people in, and I made a commitment to put up $150 million. And I gave them a letter that day before I left for Greece. And when I landed in Greece, the next day, the headline was, Sal sells out to Disney. The next day. Now, they had signed, what he did is he delivered all these letters of credit. He had the $3 billion. He sold his stock back to them. I went over to Merrill Lynch's office in Greece, in Athens, and the stock had dropped $15 from 60, well, it got down to 42, and it was at 63, $21. I called up my broker, New York, and I said, start buying Disney stock. I hadn't looked at a balance sheet or any of this. And I bought, in 3 days, 9% of Disney. At that price. The arbitrageurs couldn't get rid of the stock fast enough because they saw Sal sold out, no one's going to take it over. And I had, in those days, you could buy up to 10%. You're supposed to file at 5, but you can buy that next 5 quickly so that you have time to file the whole 9+%. I was in Greece, and I got back in time to sign the papers, and I put out a 13D, but I just bought 9.6% of Disney. I became the largest shareholder. And I put in my 13D that I was interested in all these options, buying the company, maybe not, selling my stock, maybe not, buying it, maybe not. And they decided that they were going to go out and buy gifts and greeting cards to fend me off. The attitude was, if they buy a piece of junk, I'll go away. And they were going to pay Bill Simon. I don't remember, he was the treasurer of our country. He put up $1 million one day and bought gifts and greeting card. He was going to sell it to them for $800 million. And I sued them to stop it. And I continued buying stock. And when I was done, we stopped the transaction. They yielded. And the Bass brothers owned about 6% of the company. And they wanted to meet with me because we threw out this guy, that was Disney's son. It was his son-in-law, married to his daughter. He was worthless. He was running the company, he had no idea what he was doing. I can't remember his name. Left a good impression on me. Anyways, we threw him out. The board agreed. And then we decided to have a meeting, the Basses and I, as to who was going to run Disney. And I went down, Disney, we met in New York, and we decided that it would be Mike Eisner and Frank Wells. And the reason we picked Mike came from Paramount. He was doing very well in pictures, and this is when Disney was really lacking. And Frank Wells was one of the greatest operating guys in the world. He was with Time Warner. He did a great job. And these two were just superior people in the world of business. And we decided to all meet with Frank Wells, Mike Eisner, the Basses, and myself one day. And Disney actually sent the airplane to pick me up to take me to Dallas to be at the Basses, and they were there, and they made this presentation. But before we got in to the meeting, Sid Bass said to me, all I want to do is sell my stock. I want out of this thing. I said, okay, I'm sure people will buy your stock. Mike Eisner and Frank Wells did such a great job of presenting their vision to the company. that Sid and I went into an office. Everybody else sat there, and Sid and I went and had lunch together. And I said, Sid, I'm going to buy more stock. But I got to go back. Carl Boyle was my partner. He bought half, and I bought half. I said, I'm going to double down. I'm going to buy again what I have. You are? I said, yeah. He said, well, maybe we'll buy some more. I said, well, you just wanted to sell. I thought you wanted to get out. We'd buy your stock if you want to get out. No. He said, maybe we'll buy some more. Let's think about it. So that day, when the day ended, we patted everybody in the back and told them how great they were doing. And I said to Sid, Sid, look, let's agree upon one thing. Whoever buys stock, we'll split it with each other. You get half, I get half, or vice versa. He said, you got a deal. Shakes my hand. Not the next morning, like 2 days later, I called him up and I said, we're going to buy another $150 million worth of stock. He said, really? I said, yeah. Okay, well, maybe we'll go along with you. He said, I'll let you know. Within an hour, there was a block that went up on the stock exchange. Huge block of Disney stock. At $62, $63, which was $3 higher than the market. And I traced it down. It was Ivan Boesky's stock he'd sold to the Basses. And I called Sid Bass up and I said, Sid, did you buy that block of stock? He says, yeah. I said, great. I said, how much do I owe you? We'll take half. What do you mean half? I'm not giving you the stock. I said, Sid, we made a deal. Half the stock, He said, no, I changed my mind. I got no deal with you. I said, who the hell wants to be a partner in a company with you? Your word is no good? You see it in writing anywhere? I mean, he reminded me there's nothing in writing. I made a decision. I don't want to be anywhere in a business where Sid Bass is in. I called up Mike Eisner, who I became very friendly with, and I said, Mike, I'm getting out. And I said, the reason I'm getting out is I don't trust the Basses. He said, well, that's great news to hear. He says, they're now the biggest shareholders in the company, and you don't trust them, and I'm working for them. I said, well, Mike, you can make your choice. I'm making mine. I'm getting out. And make a long story short, the Basses bought my block. Negotiated. Mike went on, and of course, the world knows where Mike is today. He did a great job. His ego got in the way a little bit, and he got a few bumps in the road. Poor Frank got killed in a helicopter crash. He was a great guy. Him and it was a big ski. Him and his son, one of his sons, got killed in a helicopter crash here about 10 years ago. But it got into Mike's ego, and I ran away from it. We did very well financially. I did very, very well. That was my experience in business. Yes.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
The best advice I ever received?
Yep.
Well, I give you two. One's in business and one's in my personal life. Carl Pollack always used to tell me, always look at the thing that you wanted the most that you missed as being very fortunate because you shouldn't have gotten it. It could have been the worst thing that happened to you. In other words, never look back on something in business that you wanted and didn't get. It could have changed your life negatively rather than positively in a business deal. And I said, Carl, well, what if the deal turned out to be great for somebody? Well, what makes you think you could have made it great? You probably would have screwed it up. Think of it that way, he says. You'll never, ever look back. And he's right. I miss a deal, somebody would say, well, how do you feel? Fine, I didn't want that deal in the first place. What do you mean you didn't want the deal in the first place? You tried. As the guy told me a long time ago, the deal I miss is the one I didn't want anyways. So I don't use Carl's name as frequently as I have here. And the other thing is my dad, who I spent a lot of time with, and he used to preach to me. He said, son, I may not leave you a lot of money, but I'll promise you this, I'll leave you a good name. Once you destroy that name, all the money in the world will never get it back for you. So make sure that your integrity and your morals and your ethics in business. You can be tough. If people can think you be unfair, that doesn't mean you are. But make sure that you internally feel morally and ethically cleansed with what you're doing. And treat people the way you want to be treated. Two personal ones. Yes.
I was just kind of wondering about trying to take Genmar public again in
Yes, about 3 or 4 years ago.
and why did the IPO withdraw?
Why do we withdraw it?
Yeah.
Well, there's several reasons, but the main reason under not taking it public was that they wouldn't give me the credit that I wanted for the value that I thought the stock should be at. Our timing was very poor, to go public with it at the time. As it turns out, we were very lucky because between you and I, based on the world of public companies out there today, the investment that we've made since that time, we could never have made had we been public. We wouldn't be the business we are today. So, in a way, I'm lucky, but I didn't get lucky because I was smart. I mean, I was lucky. It wasn't because I was smart. What we did was we pulled it because the market wouldn't accept it the way we wanted to put it out there. And today we're a debt-free company. We're the largest privately held boat company in the world and quite successful at what we do there. So we're fortunate. Yes?
You said you were married for 44 years.
Yes.
How do you manage your family with you?
How do I manage my family?
Sorry, not manage, but how do you split your time? How do you manage to keep both? Yeah, balance.
Yeah. I've always been a believer that people use excuses not to take on the family responsibility. I used to watch in the 80s. I was not a guy that went out at night for cocktails or dinners. I went home. I mean, there was nights we had 3 PTA meetings. I had to make 2, my wife had to make 1. There was ball games. My daughter Sheila was with the handicap Brownies. I used to go every week with her. If I had to fly in, take my plane in from New York and go back the next day, I would do it because it was important to her. It was not easy. It was very hard. And there were times my wife said, "What the hell are you doing? You can't keep this up." I said, "I will." Even today she says that, so that doesn't make a difference. But she still loves me, I think, for it. I've been, I think, a decent husband and a good father as best I know how. I'm sure if I was to do it over, I'd do a few things differently. But as I look back, it isn't that I've done anything that I'm sorry about. But I got to tell you, it was not easy. We didn't have nannies and cooks and things, even when I had the resources. We did it ourselves. Yes, in the back.
Especially in the 80s when you do these castle takeovers, and then you sell them off, how do you make something, that you thought you couldn't do a good job at? How did you make that desirable for other people when you're selling them?
Let me understand though. You say in the 80s when I purchased.
Well, like the grain brewery.
Grain mill, yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Like when you realized.
I saw value when somebody else didn't. I mean, people did not want to go through the trouble of making the money necessary to get the value out of that company. For an example, when I took it over, they had an unfunded pension liability. That's what the auditors told them. I just accepted what they said, that was one of the reasons why they sold me the business, because this is an off-balance sheet number. Well, when I got out of the business, we did have an unfunded pension. It turned out that the government picked up that one, and then I had an overfunded that I was able to take out. I took $2 million out of the overfunded, and the government picked up the other one, which was, I didn't steal from anybody. It was the way life was. It was just the way it was. But no one spent the time to do it. I have many experiences I could tell you. Listen, I bought Beacon's Moving and Storage Company in 1981. I never saw anything but a public document. They had 104 pieces of property, most of it in California, New York, Chicago, Atlanta, Arizona. The guy who started Beacon's bought these real estate places. He couldn't afford to be in the city, so he built it on the outskirts, which turned out to be Beverly Hills, or was end of New York City. I bought this company for $91 million. I never saw anything but their balance sheet. They had all their real estate written off. I sold $200 million of real estate in 7 weeks after I owned it. I made $100 million in 7 weeks in real estate, and it was so hot. Where the downtown LA convention center is, that was my property. I sold it to the city. Hollywood and Vine. New York City, next to CBS building. In New York, we had the building. I mean, this property it was on the books for nothing. I don't know how I got it. I mean, it was everybody else stood there and said it's a dumb, stupid company. It was a great company. So it's different strokes for different folks. Yes, I'm sorry.
Do you still have any type of relationship with Carl?
Oh, Carl was absolutely my surrogate father, my best friend, my everything. Matter of fact, when I leave here, I'll be going to have dinner with him at the game tonight. Carl, I see he's 92 years old. I take him to Las Vegas for his birthday every year. We just got back in August. I had a situation here about 3 years ago. I lost a lot of money in 3 fraud cases, and 2 fraud cases. One's called Ramasoft, the one was called Clarence. And I lost $90 million in those fraud cases in stocks that I owned. It was quite a hit, let me tell you. But I wouldn't give up. And I sued them, and believe it or not, we got the people, found them over in Europe. The FBI stepped in, they froze their accounts. And to my amazement, we'll probably get back 75–80% of our money, which is something I never expected. I was so mad I didn't care what it took. I'd personally kill the play. Yes. Sorry. Yes.
I was wondering, in the 80s, how did you get your information about these companies?
All public. All, I mean, you
Don't
don't
like to
understand.
talk the internet and stuff like that.
No, there was no internet. By the way, I know this is going to sound very strange to you. I'm the only one in my company that doesn't have voicemail, and I don't have a computer. What? I have no voicemail and no computer. Anywhere in my world. Now, I have plenty of people around me that do all that. I have 3 secretaries, and they're all on voicemail, they're all on computers, but I have none. My cell phone, nothing. Voicemail. I mean, my life is enough the way it is. I can't take any more. I know what it is. So, what I did is people always called me with their ideas. I mean, I was a conduit. I moved very quickly, and I did things differently than most people did. They looked at them, massaged them, couldn't make up their minds. In my case, I used a lot of common sense. It worked out.
Irwin, we have to cut it
Okay,
off.
I didn't have one in the back. Go ahead.
You began marketing votes through Walmart, which seems like...
I didn't begin that. I just used that as another opportunity. I didn't begin that.
Okay, but that was another thing, you were going to do that. I was reading on the
Yeah.
site. What research or what did you see or what did you believe that you could sell a vote to somebody that was coming into General Motors to buy a car?
You say what?
Well, on the site it says that you were also General Motors, you partnered up with General
We
Motors.
partnered with General Motors.
Marketing your votes through them.
What we did is we offered it to their employees.
Oh, I see, okay.
And they had a lot of employees, we sold a lot of votes to employees.
Okay.
I'm sorry I didn't take all your questions. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.